Okay, good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining me this morning to talk about astronism. I'm very excited today to be speaking to you all. So this is going to be a lecture that probably is very different from ones that you've had before, because there's lots of new words that you've probably not heard of. So just bear that in mind. And this is something that's very close to my heart, and it's something that I'm continually working on right now and will do hopefully for a long time to come. So today, the lecture is titled The Eschatology and Soteriology of Astronism. You may be aware of those two words there, but you may not be, but it'll be fine. We'll get through those. So who am I? Well, I'm a graduate in business and marketing from the University of Central Lancashire, UCLan. And really that business and marketing degree has really helped me a lot in being able to really present my ideas in a way that is very understandable and clear to people. I think that the marketing degree really acted as the foundation for me to do a lot of the things that I do now. Then for my master's degree, I moved on into religion itself. And for my dissertation that I just completed in September, I looked at astronomy's role in prehistoric religion, which you can take a look at after the lecture if you wish to do so. Really, that is going to be included a lot in what I'm talking about. And then now I've just started my PhD just this month on freedom of religion and human rights. So I'm moving into a totally different area, but of course it's still very important to what I'm doing as sort of a new religious movement, making sure that we've got the rights and the freedoms that everyone should have in the world is really important. So what is astronism then? That's the big question, isn't it? Well, first of all, I like to look at the word. Astron or astro means the stars, of course, and then you've got ism, which is a belief system of some kind. There are different types of belief systems, of course, so we need to bear that in mind, but really this is the religion of the stars, and that will become, what that means will become more clear perhaps, hopefully by the end of this section, this lecture, but obviously there is an overview here. There is some key words that we can take away, and I suppose this is probably one of the main slides that I'd like you to take a look at, is that obviously you've got astronism there as the belief system, astronist, follower. You can keep going down the list there of some of these key terms, just like in any other belief system. You know, Christianity has got Christians, and then the Bible, and then the founder, of course, is Jesus, and then there's other people involved, of course, but so in a similar way, it's got a similar structure to some of the other belief systems that we'll be more familiar with. And probably one of the most important words on there is the 1/3 from the bottom, cosmocentrism, which is what we're going to be looking at in a second. That's the Vendox there, that picture that's just come up on the right-hand side. That's our main symbol. We use that in all different things that we do, you know, whether it's a lecture like I'm doing today, or our websites, which you'll be able to take a look at later on. I'll give you the links to those. But essentially, astronism is a belief system or a life stance. I like that word, life stance, because it's a little bit more broader. But I see it as really a synthesis of religion, philosophy, spirituality, and a political ideology. Because I think all of those, what each of those designations or categories means something different to every person, of course, but I think that they explore different aspects of life and different topics. And that's what astronism really does. It is engaged in politics, because, of course, space exploration is a lot about politics and you know, democracy and the political agendas of the day. And what this discussion really is what we call meta-astronism. So discussing what astronism is and what its purpose is. But just going back to that key word, cosmocentrism or cosmocentric, that really encapsulates our worldview. So as the word suggests, we place the cosmos or the astronomical world at the center of everything we do, our practices, our beliefs, and just the way we see the world. And I suppose you can compare this to some other centricities like theocentrism, for example, in Islam, or anthropocentrism, like in humanism, for example. So each religion really you can categorize according to what it places the most emphasis on. That doesn't mean that we don't care about humanity or that we don't care about God at all. It just means that the cosmos for us is that central source. I really like this idea of the source of knowledge, or the source of faith, or the source of belief. Of course, for other religions, that is God itself. But for astronism, we do see the astronomical world as that source. And for that reason, we actually attract a lot of atheists to astronism, funnily enough, because, of course, you don't have to believe in God to be an astronist. So I think a lot of atheists find this belief system very attractive. It's something that, especially for skeptical people, they can see the astronomical world. They don't have to take my word for it. And they can relate to the astronomical world in the ways that I'm talking about without necessarily needing too much faith in other things, in spirituality, for example. But I suppose the main theme that we are based on is an astronomical theme, of course. And so what that basically means is that all the philosophical discourses and discussions that we have, the most important ones to us are those that relate to space exploration or just space in general. So you can see there you've got space ethics, or the ethics of space exploration. That's a really important topic for us, very central to what we believe, and of course that will always be very central to how we see the world as well, and the future. Just another, on the last bullet point there, the nature of astronism is very interesting because it focuses on the night sky. And this is very different from other religions because in a way that every person in the world can see the night sky, of course. And no matter what race you are, class, nationality, or wealth, or even religion, you can gaze upon the stars and you can experience that word there called astronality right at the end there, which is a really important word that I'm going to be defining in a short while. But I suppose the goals of astronism are to create sort of a worldwide movement, really, that sort of gets humanity to look at space and outer space and its exploration as a sort of existential endeavor, really, like I've wrote on the slide there, that it's connected to faith, spirituality, destiny, life purpose, which aren't always what we think about when we think about space exploration, especially not in the mainstream media. Usually it's presented, the economic benefits of space exploration are emphasized, definitely, but not the existential, philosophical, spiritual aspects of space exploration. They are not emphasized. And so really that's what astronism's goal is to bring that to the world and try and get people to really think in that way a little bit more. And also as well, astronism's goal is to reinvigorate this religious tradition that I theorized and am trying to establish, called the Astronic religious tradition. You'll learn a little bit more about that later on. Really what it wants to do is to establish this religious tradition in order to address contemporary life and issues that we face, really, and of those in the future, of course. So we come back to this, another key word, astronality. There's a lot of astro words, by the way, that begin with astro or cosmo, just because of the theme of the religion, I suppose. But this keyword astronality is really one that if anything today, take this away and really think about this. What we define astronality as is a human emotion and a psychological experience that also may have spiritual, physical derivations. And really it's a mixture of wonderment or self-reflection and also existential meaning, really. as a result of observing the astronomical world. And psychologist William E. Kelly has referred to this emotional connection as noxalador. This is really, really interesting for me because this is what I see as the origins of faith connected to the stars, is this sort of this, and I'm sure everyone has experienced that at some point in their lives. You know, when we look up at the stars at night, we do get some type of feeling about the future, our destiny, why we're here. This is what we call astronality, and this is at the basis of everything that astronism is based on, really. And it's this that we base our beliefs on, really. So this connection, this psychological experience is, as I've said there, well, the point of astronism is to sort of master this belief, this experience, to master these emotions, and what we call that is astrosis. Now, this is a new word that I'm going to be looking at in the eschatology mainly. It's going to be very relevant for that. But what really astrosis is sort of like a mastery of the self, but also a mastery of one's experiences, and really to explore the astronomical world in an intellectual way, spiritual way, and also hopefully one day in a physical way. Of course, that means going up into space. And astronauts have also experienced what they call the overview effect, which is this profound experience of astronauts when they go up into space and they look at the Earth and they realize sort of our position, really, and our insignificance in some ways in relation to the universe. That is a huge shift in the way that you view the world, of course. And then we've also got another belief, which is called cosmosis. Again, a newish word. And basically what that means is that after we die, I believe that when we die, we go back to the cosmos. Now that can be interpreted in a variety of ways, and it is interpreted in a variety of ways, and we're going to come to that and those different interpretations. But that's the fundamental belief. There's also another word that might be of interest to you called astrotheism, which is another astro word. And again, that's just reaffirming the principle that the astronomical world is involved with the affairs of death and the afterlife, and some type of existential meaning and destiny, whereas other religions don't tend to really involve the astronomical world. I mean, you've got Christianity and the Star of Bethlehem, but it's all metaphorical, it's not literal. And I'm talking about the literal. That's what we believe, that the astronomical world is definitely involved in some way, because we don't see that, but in the sense that for example, in other religions, after we die, the concept is that we go to some other realm, like heaven, for example, a spiritual realm that is not sort of in any way connected to the astronomical world. And it seems that the cosmos or the universe is sort of bypassed, that you go somewhere else. We kind of don't really believe that. We believe that it is the astronomical world that we go to after we die, and we can discuss that in this discussion, of course. And so, just the bottom, the bullet point there. I think I've traced this sort of aspect of our human psyche back to the Stone Age, and you can read my dissertation to really get a more in-depth understanding of this. But I realized that the carvings that people used to do into rock walls, when they used to depict constellations, and when they used to then worship stars as a result, they experienced something very similar to what I'm experiencing now, possibly in a different way, of course, and they viewed the universe in a different way. They didn't have as much knowledge as we do now, but I do trace that astronality back to 40,000 BC, roughly. Just because I know that a lot of you are interested in theology and you're budding theologians, I thought this page might be quite interesting to include. So, Astronist theology. One of the most important things about astronism to remember is that we are cosmocentric. So we're not always going to be talking about God. And really the concept of God, the role of God in astronism is not central, of course, because we believe in cosmocentrism. So we're not always talking about the centrality of God and the important role that God plays. And really what we see this as, and the top bullet point says it there, is panentheism. So we call God the divine, and we say that the divine interpenetrates the cosmos and has some sort of role, but that it really exists outside of the cosmos, and exists independently of the cosmos. The second bullet point there is depadotheism, which is a new term that you won't have heard of before. This is probably the one that probably most diverge with perhaps with your own ideas of God, especially within the Islamic tradition. This states that sort of the rejection of the anthropomorphism of God. So the idea that God is merciful, or that God can have emotions in a similar way to humans, or that God has a role in human morality. All these things are really pretty much rejected within depadotheism, and instead the divine plays more of a sustaining role. And not a creating role or a moral role in the universe. And we can explore that more in the discussion, of course, if that's the way that the discussion goes. There's also two other short bullet points there that I want to make a emphasis on. Astrotheism, which is the notion that the astronomical world is the portal through which God or the divine intercedes. That's a really interesting idea. Usually it's not the stars or the astronomical world as a whole that is the medium or the portal or the intermediary between humans and the divine, whereas we in astronism would probably, we would assert that. But fundamentally, in terms of Astronist theology as a whole, the Astronist agnosticism is really important, because I suppose I'd have to go more into our cosmology to understand this, which we can do in the discussion if that's the way it goes. But we understand the cosmos to have, and we understand everything to have a limited nature. So we're essentially, because of our limited natures, we're never going to be able to truly understand what is beyond the cosmos. And of course, the divine exists beyond the cosmos, according to us. So there will always be a little bit of agnosticism there. There will always be a little bit of lack of knowledge and understanding there. So that's always important to include. So getting to so that's the introduction to astronism. So hopefully you've got a general gist of what astronism is about, and some of the fundamental principles that we go by. Now we're going more into the eschatology. So eschatology is a word that belongs really in Christian theology, but we borrowed it, and it's also used in some other religious traditions, in religious studies more broadly. And it refers, of course, to death, judgment, and the final destiny of the soul and humankind, and the study of this within religion. And of course, in astronism, rather than sort of events regarding death and destiny occurring in relation to heaven and things like some sort of spiritual realm, we see the astronomical world as playing a central role in these topics, a central role in death, not really in judgment, because we don't really believe in sort of a judgment day, but definitely in terms of the final destiny of the soul and of humankind. Definitely those, we would say, the astronomical world is playing a central role, not just a peripheral one. Again, we come back to these two words, cosmosis and astrosis. These are really central to the eschatology. They form a lot of our beliefs and a lot of our, what we consider to be the central aspects of life, really. Cosmosis, again, I'll reiterate what this means. It means the union of the body and, depending on the school of thought, the soul with the cosmos upon death. So essentially, when we die, we go to the stars, we go to the cosmos or the astronomical world. And we're going to get into the different schools of thought in the next slide, I think, on that. And then astrosis is sort of another aspect of cosmosis, really, but it's asserting that this union with the cosmos can be achieved during one's lifetime. So that this union, this sort of coming to one with the cosmos is not just achievable upon death, but is actually achievable during life, through practices within astronism, through intellectual, spiritual, and of course physical, hopefully, endeavors. For example, astronauts, when they go into the cosmos or astronomical world, they are physically going into that. It's a physical experience as well as maybe a spiritual one and a philosophical one. So the two major schools of thought in eschatology are astronaturalism, or just naturalism, and transstellationism. So those are two more new words for you to digest. In astronaturalism, of course, it's the assertion of naturalism, so that only the occurrence of things can happen by natural forces, and therefore the afterlife and is generally rejected in astronaturalism, and even the existence of the soul. And therefore, in astronaturalism, what cosmosis means, so what the union with the cosmos is interpreted to mean, is something that is within the laws of nature. So things like, an astronaturalist would probably believe that when they die, they just go back into the earth. And that is the form of cosmosis. They are reuniting with the earth as a derivation of the cosmos. And that's it for them. They probably wouldn't believe in some type of afterlife or some type of journey of the soul. Whereas in transstellationism, in the other major school of thought, they do assert that. They do assert sort of a supernaturalistic worldview. And they interpret cosmosis as occurring in relation to the body, the mind, and the soul, and they emphasize sort of like the soul's journey really through the cosmos, and there's different stages to that occurrence, and that this is really a spiritual experience as well. So again, there you can see the two derivations, two divergences really within astronism there. So the soteriology we come on to now, section 3. For those who don't know, soteriology is basically the doctrine of salvation. So again, from Christianity really, but we've borrowed that for our own. Sometimes we would also call it astro-soteriology to just define this belongs to our tradition and not the Christian one. So the main aspects of this, well, the underlying principle is that the astronomical world is involved in the salvation of humanity, that really humanity is actually trapped upon the earth, that we are limited here, by our entrapment upon the earth, and that really our destiny is to explore the cosmos and to establish new planets, civilizations. Of course, this is going into the far future here, but this is part of our, in a sense, I suppose it's like our end times in some ways, in like Christianity and Islam. We see that as being the far future, and that's the humanity that we want to be able to achieve. And we only believe that we can do that through the achievement of astrosis and obviously cosmosis as well. So deep space exploration is considered the destiny and salvation of humanity. We've gone over that. A form of redemption is what we call transcension. So this is really central to the soteriology. And essentially what this means is a physical ascension to the astronomical world for humanity. And of course, with that, our knowledge will get better, our understanding of our place in the universe will improve. And so this is what essentially we say is the salvation of humanity, that when we begin to explore other planets and we truly understand our place in the universe and our destiny, I suppose, that we will achieve salvation and sort of redeem humanity from our, in a way, in our ignorant state, I would say, at the moment, and our trapped state, and our limited state here on Earth. That means that doesn't mean we don't like Earth, but it just means that we see the future as being space exploration and in the astronomical world. Okay, so this transcension, this redemption, is achieved by physical ascension, by collective knowledge, and by the individual mastery of a person's astronality, or astrosis. So astrosis is the mastery of a person's connection to the astronomical world. So there are a couple of dimensions of astrosis that I just wanted to cover quickly. Individual astrosis and collective. So we'll begin with the individual. The mastery of a person's astronality on both a spiritual, physical, and intellectual level. So this is what it means for the individual. It means that you should want to engage with the astronomical world on these different levels. And the second one there is also, if you wish to go further, you can get into things like mysticism or astral mysticism, for example. And I'd say that's the stage that I'm at. I go obviously to a much deeper level than probably most people would want to go. Meditation on the cosmos and things like that, in a deeper way. And really, essentially, it's the union of the self with the cosmos during one's lifetime. That's essentially what it is. But the collective side is really interesting because this is the application of the individual to humanity as a whole. And really what we see this is, as the endeavor of space exploration, we see that as sort of a collective union with the cosmos for all of humanity. And of course, the union of which will, the union of humanity with the cosmos is central to that. And these sort of play into each other. So the more individual astroses that there are, the more closer we will be to achieving sort of this collective astrosis. We don't really put any timescales on to the collective astrosis, by the way. It's more just, when it happens, I suppose. I mean, you could say it's happening now already with people like Elon Musk, who are already, planning trips to Mars and things. So I think it's going to be a gradual process. I don't think that collective astrosis or transcension will be sort of a overnight thing where we say, okay, we're saved now, we're redeemed now. I think it's going to be more of a gradual thing that maybe historians will look back on and say, this is when humanity really reached that point of knowledge and understanding and sort of physical ascension that we would associate astrosis with. So I suppose most of you are probably thinking, well, where's all this come from? Where have all these ideas come from? Where have all these concepts come from? Most of them have come from myself, especially some of the more contemporary ones. And people surrounding me and people who are involved in my community and the Astronist community. But of course, it goes back a lot further than just me. Of course, I founded Astronism, but there's something that existed a lot longer than what Astronism has. So Astronism claims its lineage in a series of prehistoric astronomical religions and beliefs and practices. So what that means is that Astronism really claims to be one of the oldest religions, if you look at it in terms of, or the oldest religion in a way, depending on your use of the term. And essentially what I did for my dissertation, my master's dissertation, was I collected together all of the archaeological evidence that currently is available to myself, and I looked at how far back we can link sort of astronality or some type of connection to the astronomical world on a deeper level And we got back to about 40,000 years ago, or 40,000 BCE, or about 42,000 BCE, in the Upper Paleolithic period of the Stone Age, basically. And we traced it back to the Aurignacian peoples of Europe. And these people were the first to begin to carve constellations into rock faces, to create amulets, for example, and other types of jewelry that had astronomical symbols on them and an astronomical theme in general. And what I said is that this was the beginning of the Astronic tradition. So like in other religions, obviously you've got Islam and Christianity belong to the Abrahamic tradition. Buddhism, Hinduism belong to the Dharmic tradition. Confucianism belongs to the Taoic traditions of China. Well, we say that there is a fourth tradition here, and that is an Astronic tradition, and that it stretches back to be the oldest tradition of religion, which is still quite a controversial assertion to make. And I suspect that will take quite a while to gain support, but I think it will do eventually, depending on, the amount, as time goes on, more evidence will come out about the prehistoric times. So I'm sure that as time goes on, we'll get more evidence of astronomical beliefs in the Stone Age. And of course, it's continually practiced to today, because astronism is part of this tradition. And there's other aspects to that as well. Astrology, for example, is related to astronism. We see it more as a cousin, really, to astronism. And then you've also got star worship. You might be aware of that if you know about the history of Islam and the origins of Islam, and the interactions that early Muslims had with the star worshippers is absolutely fantastic. And hopefully Harith will be able to give me some more resources on that. That'll be really interesting. You've got the Nebra sky disk there on the right hand side. That's a really interesting specimen that I included as part of my dissertation. But these are just some of the things that I found. So like accurate constellation carvings, amulets depicting the stars, elaborate rock art, utilitarian astronomical religion, for example. All of these things bring together the Astronic tradition. What I mean by the utilitarian astronomical religion is the use of the stars, and this is what a lot of it came from, really, the use of the stars for agricultural purposes and other non-religious purposes. And then that resulted in religious behavior and religious practices. So, for example, a lot of ancient prehistoric cultures, especially around sort of the last ice age area, or just before that perhaps, were using the stars, especially the constellation Ursa Major, to track the seasons. And so they related their survival with the stars and began to worship the stars, as you probably would do back then. They believed that the stars were in control of the harvest, in control of their livelihood, and so they started to worship the stars, and this is where it came from. You've got other things as well as part of the utilitarian religion. You've got navigation by the stars. So you've got the Polynesians in the Pacific Ocean who use the stars to reach those very isolated islands in the Pacific Ocean. And as a result, stars became a very important motif or theme in their religions. And then also you've got the cosmic hunt there as well, which is really interesting, that I'm going to get to in maybe the next slide or the one after that. So this is another interesting area as well, and maybe one of you might want to study this area, the origins of religion. Really, really interesting, especially if you're interested in history and archaeology and religion, and it all sort of combines together. It's great. I love this. I want to do more work in this area. I've identified about 5 theories for the origins of religion. You've got the Abrahamic one. So the idea that religion really began with the covenant of Abraham with God. Then you've got the evolutionary one, the idea that really religious behavior can be traced back to primate species, and that really it's evolution that is connected to the development of religion. You've got the feminist theory, which is that matriarchal religion or the worship of goddesses was central to the origins of religion. The psychedelic one, which is really interesting, the idea that religion came from, and sort of spiritual experiences came from psychedelic drug use. Obviously, indirectly, these people didn't realize that they were inhaling sort of conscious altering substances. But that is a theory, and it's a rising theory, and there's one that's quite a few books about it. And then you've got my theory, which is the Astronist theory, which is that star worship was the first religion, the first sort of coherent religion, and that astronality, sort of our experiences with the astronomical world, with the origins of religion in the Paleolithic period. And so there you've got these 5 theories that are all vying for sort of their theory to be accepted by the academic community, I suppose. So obviously I'm going to champion astronism, of course, the Astronist approach. Again, there's just some more information on this slide about sort of the origins of religion. About 40,000 BC. So you've got the Ursa Major amulet that I discovered. Well, I didn't discover it, but I included it as part of my dissertation. Really, what struck me about it was the meticulous care. This is what really struck me about it: the meticulous care that person, whoever had done that, whoever had made this amulet, had gone to in order to create that. And if you're thinking 40,000 BCE that this has been dated to, it's just remarkable. And I just thought this must have been done for a higher purpose than just because it looked nice, or because, or, you know, not connected to any beliefs. Just, to me, just doesn't seem rational. I think it is rational and logical to say that these people were looking up at the stars and had beliefs about the stars that were of a religious or philosophical nature or existential nature. So astronomical religions are therefore considered, usually we consider them to be the 3rd oldest form of religious expression, which is usually like a broader term, really, from an actual religion itself. The 2 other forms were bear worship, which we know went on, and also the burial of people, which suggests some type of belief in the afterlife, but I suppose isn't actually direct evidence of that. Again, we've got some really beautiful carvings here. These are some of the most famous ones. You've got the Great Star Bull, which is a form of astromorphism, another astro word. Astromorphism is the attribution of is the attribution of constellations to terrestrial objects or beings. So, for example, the person there you can see who's highlighted the Orion constellation is interpreted as a man, and the Taurus constellation is interpreted as the bull. So that's what we call astromorphism. It's using the constellations and the stars to relate to something on the Earth. You've got the Pleiades aurochs there. You've got the Aurignatian lunar calendar. There's a huge amount of evidence in different forms, carvings, art, rock art and depictions. There's a huge amount. You can take a look at my dissertation if you wish to see more of that. But it's all absolutely fascinating. It's brilliant. I love this area of study. And of course, we've got the cosmic hunt, which is really interesting. I wanted to just include this. The cosmic hunt was one of the most important aspects of my study into the Astronic tradition. And essentially it is a myth, but perhaps then it was more of a belief, a literal belief perhaps, that essentially there's lots of different variants, and the map that you can see on the screen there shows all of those different variants throughout the world. And the fact that it actually reached the Americas suggests that it has origins before 15,000 BC, because that's when the Bering Land Bridge, right up there between Russia and Alaska, that's when that broke away and humans could no longer traverse over to the Americas. So a lot of the Inuit tribes and the Inca and the Maya all had versions of this, and the Native Americans as well, all had variants and versions of this myth. The general gist of the myth is that it sort of depicts hunters going through this forest, or like a Paleolithic forest, and they wound this beast that they're trying to chase after, and the beast is described as moving up to the stars and becoming the Ursa Major constellation. And so really where that comes from, and what we see this is the first belief in transtellation, the idea that when we die, our soul transmigrates to the stars. And this can be seen also throughout a lot of other sort of evidence in more modern, in more medieval and ancient times. There's lots of evidence for ideas about the astronomical world as being literally involved with the ideas of the afterlife. Then you've got things like the construction of Stonehenge in the Neolithic era. They were all astronomically aligned. It's very well documented that there were astronomical religious practices at Stonehenge. We generally don't identify with pagans, generally. We see ourselves as sort of distinct from sort of a pagan tradition. But a lot of our beliefs, especially from maybe Christian and Islamic point of view, may be considered pagan. But we identify ourselves as distinct from some of the guys that you see at the Stonehenge. But it is connected, but there's a slight difference in identification there. So as we begin to come to the end of the lecture, I just wanted to show you my master's dissertation. So you can, if you follow the link there, this, by the way, this video will be going up on to YouTube afterwards. So if you want to, you can also write that link down and from the video later on, and you can take a look at my master's dissertation. So this is the one where it goes into a huge amount of depth regarding astronomical origins of religion and the Astronic tradition. So I completed that in September, but there's still, since September, there's been more things that have come out. So I'll probably have to continue to do research in this area. Just going back to Astronism for a moment, there's some Astronist books there. The Concise Dictionary of Astronism, that's a really good one that they've come out with. There's also a new, I'm working on at the moment, full dictionary of Astronism, which will have thousands of terms within it that are relating to all aspects of astronism and everything I've spoken about today and more. So that's coming out probably in the next month or so. The Omnidoxy, if you remember from our overview of Astronism at the beginning, the Omnidoxy is the central, the founding book of Astronism. So there's just a few books there. If I mean, the Omnidoxy you can get for free online, I think. There's some links that you'll be able to find it at. The full book is very, very long. It's like over almost 2 million words. So, and it's still being added to. I'm still adding to the book because there's just so much that needs to still be added to it. It's an ongoing project. So there's just some works there that you may be interested in looking at. And so I suppose just as we begin to come to the end of the lecture, just going over some of my ambitions for the future personally. At the moment, I want to attain my doctorate and continue lecturing and doing lectures like this. My three main areas, I would say, of research are freedom of religion, the origins of religion, and astronism itself, and sort of astronomy and religion as well. And those are the things that I want to continue to do research on. And also at the bottom there, you can see I want to gain recognition for astronism in different countries, and that will lead us on to the topic for my PhD, which probably the next slide after this one. I just wanted to include this. This is a quote from the Omnidoxy or another book that I've written that I found again, and I thought it was really interesting, and it sort of encapsulates a lot of what I've said today. We will return to the place from which we came. That's really interesting in terms of, I don't know if you guys have heard of the panspermia theory, but it's a scientific theory that suggests that life on Earth came from the astronomical world, that came from comets and microorganisms living in comets. And when a comet struck the Earth maybe millions of years ago, that was the origins of life. It's quite a widely accepted theory that's gaining more and more acceptance in the scientific community. But I think that really connects to what I've said there in that quote. And really all of astronism connects to that quote, really. And I suppose astronism really is that return to the cosmos, return to the astronomical world, in a very profound way, in a way that affects us all, existentially and philosophically. So I just wanted to include that there. It might get you guys thinking about what that might mean and how astronism all ties up together. Here's some resources. There's not a huge amount of resources there, but I'll probably include some more in the YouTube description when I post it onto YouTube. Maybe Harith can show you that later on if he gets the chance. But there are some resources there that you can take a look at regarding some of the things I've been speaking about. Just as an addendum as well. So this is my PhD proposal that's been accepted, and now I'm actually studying this now. But you can take a look at that. So if your interests focus more on human rights and what's going on in the world right now, rather than space and the future and astronomical things, you can take a look at how governments control religious activity through recognition is the general gist of what I'm studying for my PhD, and how essentially religious organizations are the freedom of religion is impeded by these recognition systems. For example, China only recognizes 5 religions, and if you don't fit in with those 5 religions, you've got a big problem. So I'm looking at that, and that's one of my main areas of discussion and research as well. So take a look at that if that's interest to you. So if you want to visit some of Astronism's websites, you can do so there. Just note those down: astronism.org, astronism.com. You can also take a look at Astropedia, which is a wiki that I run, that is constantly being updated by myself and different people that are involved in Astronism. That's got a lot of information on there about pretty much everything to do with Astronism. I'm also doing a video series as well at the moment. One episode just came out last night, and it's called A Conversation with Cometan. And on that, we discuss all different, like the things I've been talking about today. So astronomical religion, space religion, space exploration, the future of humanity, things like that. And so, you can take a look at all those resources. There's so much on Google about astronism. And I suppose that brings us to the end of the lecture. So I thank you for all for listening, and I hope that the way that I've communicated astronism has been digestible and understandable. And I do look forward to any questions, but thanks for listening, everybody.